So we've been talking about the TPP, and I don't have much time left. So let me just get down to my thoughts about the TPP and President Trump withdrawing us out of the TPP. Here's the problem. Here's the problem with TPP. Here's the problem with our politics today in general. And the reason this comes up is because we have a lot of noise on the periphery that is distracting us from the core question that we need to answer, right? We have a lot of voices who are either intentionally or unintentionally, I don't really care if they don't know better, they are serving the role of distracting us from some fundamental questions about how we are going to organize our society and move forward into the future. We have not answered two fundamental questions about the future of humanity. In fact, our elected officials would rather pretend as though there's no problem at all, that there are no questions, that everything is exactly as it should be. Those questions are, how do we balance the interest of labor in a world that is crafted to serve capital? And the other question is, how do we break free from the race to the bottom, competing with other nations for all of the crumbs that fall off the table of multinational corporations? When we have nations that would gladly give companies like Google and Apple a 0.0005% corporate tax rate, right? Anyone involved in that type of race is involved in a race to the bottom. So we have to ask ourselves the question, what are we going to do about the fight between capital and labor? And what are we going to do about our relationship with corporations? We haven't answered either of these questions. And those questions, the answers, the ramifications of those answers are so far reaching that they will be answered eventually, whether we want to address them or not. But instead of addressing them, instead of addressing the underlying problem of the very real competition between capital and labor, our leaders would rather try to sell you just the good parts of legislation, good parts of the TPP. Pay attention only to what's good about it and pay no attention whatsoever to the bad portions of these types of trade policies. It's either that or they would rather avoid the conversation altogether by deploying their identity-only political pundits to make every economic issue about racism. Every economic issue is a racism issue to them because they know if they could find a way to swift boat you in that way, you'll be stuck trying to figure out how the hell we, black people, minorities, women, people of color, all of a sudden became racist dude bros because we oppose an economic trade deal. And what's disturbing is that the newfound Democratic Party love of the TPP is the quintessential example of swift boating. Today, President Orange Julius signed an executive order removing the United States from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP. Also today, media pundits and left-leaning outlets have come out in tacit support of the TPP because, as we all know, we must be willing to oppose Trump even when he's doing something we normally would agree with. And I get that you want to hashtag resist everything that Donald Trump supports, but my money is on Donald Trump being wrong 99 times out of 100. Pick one of the issues, pick one of the many issues that he's going to be wrong about and resist him there. But the TPP is not one of them. And to see Democratic-leaning media outlets like Think Progress swing their support in favor of the TPP, despite hundreds of thousands of Democratic voters opposing it during the primaries at the DNC, suggests that the Democratic establishment actually has no ideological center. They're merely becoming marketers and opportunists, if they weren't already that. So Samantha Page from Think Progress, she writes this paragraph, and I want you to hear this clearly. She says, from the right, the TPP was criticized for undermining U.S. manufacturing and jobs. From the left, it was criticized for not going far enough on human rights and environmental protections. This is masterful propaganda, realigning, asserting the interests of the left as being something that is completely not inclusive of the things that we actually care about. Basically saying that the left in America is only to be concerned with human rights and environmental protections, which we absolutely are. But I'm sorry, but our brains, our synapses are firing fast enough for us to be able to handle economic issues alongside of human rights issues, alongside of environmental issues, and yes, alongside racial issues. We can do both and all the above. The left also opposed the TPP because it would threaten American jobs without any meaningful protections for American labor or international labor. We're not simply concerned about the jobs of our brothers down the street. We are concerned about global labor, international labor. And while the TPP gave multinational corporations the ability to sue nations like the United States for any economic, environmental, or trade policy that would encumber their profits. And while the TPP also gave pharmaceutical companies additional patent protections for life-saving drugs, which would have made it more difficult for poor nations to get affordable, generic versions of their drugs to their populations, there were zero actionable protections for American and international labor. Yes, they made gestures towards labor. Yes, they made requirements for labor unions. Yes, they made requirements for a minimum wage, but they had no actionable measures for a nation to actually force another nation to acquiesce to the agreement when it came down to labor. Matter of fact, Robert Reich, former labor secretary for Bill Clinton, he wrote, "The TPP is a Trojan horse in a global race to the bottom, giving big corporations and Wall Street banks a way to eliminate any and all laws and regulations that get in the way of their profits." This is what the TPP was. Yes, it had meaningful provisions that would give the United States companies, advantages in a region of the world that included 40% of the world's population. Yes, it would have given us a leg up against China. Yes, it would have allowed us to be able to be leaders in that region of the world, being able to set the standards for our trade before China could have. Yes, it would have required nations to no longer bar labor unions and to institute a minimum wage. But the TPP gave corporations the means to sue whenever profits were hurt. And there were no meaningful measures for nations to act when labor was hurt. Furthermore, the TPP did nothing, absolutely nothing, to address the question that we have been avoiding since Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, for the love of God. How will we actually balance the interests of hundreds of millions, billions of laborers who are at the mercy of capital? And it does nothing to answer the question of how can any nation actually thrive when corporations have us competing with each other to see who will give up the most concessions, who will charge the lowest corporate tax rates, who will remove the most environmental or labor regulations, fully exposing us to the whims of corporations? Which nation is going to be willing to become nothing more than the muse of the profits or for the profits of multinational corporations? That's the question. And that's what we should be discussing. But instead of that, we've got the usual suspects making this issue about race. I don't even know how the hell you do that. How do you make the TPP, an argument about race? That's beyond me. Maybe I'm not smart enough to see that bullshit around the corner, but it's just beyond me. But somehow we've taken the issue about labor rights and about bigger questions, and we reduced it down to being about Donald Trump is a racist And if Donald Trump opposes the TPP, maybe that's something that we should support. I tell you what, in one of those many nations that we're going to sign on to the TPP, I'm sure there's a cliff. There's a cliff that's overlooking a valley that is big enough and deep enough that if you fall off of it, you would probably die. I want you to take your vapid, fatuous, childlike arguments and jump off that cliff.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
It's Ben Dixon!
If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.